I want to take some time now to discuss an issue that I know many of you are concerned about, and it's vaping and the rise of a so-called black market for vape products. You might remember that earlier this year, the federal government brought in plans to change how vape products are sold in this country. Up until the end of this month, people need a doctor's prescription to buy nicotine vapes from pharmacies. But on October 1, that's all going to change. From that day, anyone aged over 18 will legally be able to buy vapes from a pharmacy without a prescription. The idea is that the policy will crack down on tobacconists and other resellers profiting from an out-of-control black market for vapes that ultimately see these things land in the hands of our kids. The only issue is that the pharmacies are fuming about it, saying they shouldn't ever be legally responsible for selling these things because they're not a health product. So I'll have a chat to the Pharmacy Guild of Queensland in a moment. But first I want to bring in Ross Fitzgerald. He's an Emeritus Professor at Griffith University. He knows all about addictions. He's very critical of this plan, and he joins me now. Ross, thanks for your time.
Good to talk with you again, Peter.
You think this plan is set to fail?
It's absolutely set to fail. It's utterly unworkable. And pharmacists and vapers both hate the system. I mean, it's ridiculous to have pharmacists being responsible for selling vapes. They can open themselves up to, I would have thought, legal challenges. And it's a bit like, as I wrote, it's a bit like getting pharmacists to sell light beer as a substitute for, full-strength beer.
Why did the feds come up with this, Ross? What's this all about?
Well, the Federal Health Minister, Mark Butler, is very ideologically driven. And his failed prescription policy for vaping nicotine was finally scrapped by that federal Senate vote on June the 25th, and he's now introduced, which I think is an utterly unworkable system. I should make it clear, Peter, that I've never vaped. I haven't had a cigarette for about 50 years, and as you know, I've been sober for 54 years. So it's not that that I have a personal reason in terms of vaping. It's just that it seems very clear to me that vaping is the most effective aid to enable people to quit smoking cigarettes. And that's why the new, relatively new Labor UK government is following the Conservatives in spending £45 million a year, giving 1 million smokers free vapes every year. Yet in contrast, our Australian government is making safer vapes much harder to obtain than deadly cigarettes. New Zealand is leading the world in reducing cigarette smoking. New Zealand will soon be effectively smoke-free, and New Zealand's achieved this with a policy adopted in 2020 of making safer vapes easier to obtain than deadly cigarettes. And I just can't understand. The pharmacy scheme will collapse, I'm almost certain of that. And then it'll finally be time for us to adopt the sensible approach we should have adopted all along, and that is to regulate and to tax vapes as an adult consumer product, just as is the case with cigarettes. And finally, as you pointed out, the vape black market's thriving, and it will increase in selling unregulated vapes with unknown ingredients and an unknown nicotine levels to anyone of any age who has enough money to buy them. And the crime gang territory wars will escalate. There's already been, I think, 94 tobacconist shops in Australia have been firebombed by criminal gangs fighting turf wars. and young people under the health minister's system, young people will continue to have easy access to unregulated and dangerous products.
Yeah, yeah. All right. How's those Graft and Everest novels going, Ross?
Well, they're doing very well, actually. Very unusual in Australia. Our publisher, written with Ian McFadden, who's a Queenslander. Ian McFadden of Comedy Company fame. Our 4 Graft and Everest novels have been released as a 4-pack, which is very unusual for a work of fiction called The Ascent of Everest.
All right, good stuff. All right, Ross, thanks for your time. Much appreciated.
Your comedy.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again. All the best. I want to cross now to Chris Owen. He's the Queensland Branch President of the Pharmacy Guild of Australia. Chris, thanks for your time. Take me into the perspective of a local pharmacist. I imagine this plan, as Ross just pointed out, would be pretty unpopular.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Peter, to explain the pharmacist's point of view. And at the outset, this was always going to be a very complex policy to be able to implement. I mean, it's very difficult to be able to trade the trust of a white coat for a health product for essentially what is a nicotine substitution product. While we understand that there is an argument on individual freedoms of decision and the consequences of those decisions, we have to intersect that with an area of health promotion and advocacy and making sure that we do the right things, not only for the population, but also for the kids who are seeming to take up these vaping products in more and more quantity over time. So the pharmacists have taken a view that we do have some legal challenges. We do have some legal issues with professional indemnity insurance and future class actions. So Ross was completely right in that respect. So a few hairs on the policy, that's for sure. We're just getting to the pointy end now. We're still probably no closer to finding out what the solutions are than what we were when this policy was announced.
Chris, how will this impact the workload and the day-to-day operations of local pharmacists?
Well, it's just going to get to a point where we don't want to be the police of regulated products. Nicotine vapes are not health products, therefore they shouldn't be regulated like health products. There's no evidence anywhere in the world that vapes can be used for nicotine cessation. So they should be regulated like other drugs, and I'm using alcohol and nicotine in this area. They should be regulated through a different mechanism than using a health promotion device to be able to assure trust in the process. So it is something that we do need to look at, and pharmacists, if they do end up having to go down this path, will need to navigate the legal complexities. They will also have to navigate their workloads. But at this stage, there's going to be a vast number of pharmacies that will refuse to supply these.
I was going to ask you about that. Is that an option? Can you guys refuse?
Absolutely. And it not only comes down to the individual pharmacist and how they feel on the topic, because the individual pharmacists have a national registration of which they have autonomy of practice. So that's probably one thing for the community to understand is it will come down to that individual pharmacist. It will come down to that individual pharmacy about whether they see this as a health product. And we are going to have a big ask for community understanding to understand that, hey, these products that are technically available in pharmacies may not be available in all pharmacies, may not be available in any pharmacies. And further to that, the ranging of products that we will be stocking will be very limited. So in the detail of the policy, there's only 3 flavours that we can supply. It has to be of a certain strength. That strength is probably 10 times less than what the current Chinese-made vapes that are on the street now. So we are going to have people and community members that have an expectation they can get this anywhere and everywhere, but the reality is it's not going to be the case.
Has Mark Butler responded to any of the concerns that you've raised, and both you and Ross have sort of enunciated that the viability of this and the operational working of this is going to be extremely challenging?
Absolutely. And while Mark has his best intents at heart, and he wants to make sure that we don't have more kids taking up vaping, and for every week that it goes on, the more kids are taking it up. So I get he has noble endeavours. The workability is the issue that we have issue with, and it is going to be utterly unworkable. I concur with Ross. I think this is going to be a short-term plan. It's going to have consequences of people going back to the black market, and we're essentially going to be creating a new black market again because the products that we will be selling aren't the products that people are going to want to buy. And what happens in that case is they look at alternative routes and alternative avenues. And the genesis of this policy discussion was actually Greg Hunt pre-COVID when he wanted to ban it completely, but he allowed minor importations, and now we've had an explosion. Then you've got the excise tax issue, which has made cigarettes completely unsustainable in comparison to a cheaper vape product.
Indeed. All right, Chris Owen, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Peter.
There he is, Chris Owen. He's the Queensland Branch President of the Pharmacy Guild of Australia. It's 5:18.